Welcome back to the Daily Report and welcome to the marketplace. Tonight we're going to be crunching up some numbers. TV47 is going to be delving into the budget 2024-2025. We want to know what exactly is happening. We're going to be taking a recap of last year. Just want to see what exactly is happening on that front. In studio with me, I have, of course, Wycliffe Bichanga, who is going to be our accountant of the night. Just going to be telling us a little bit of math, what exactly that means, what are our expenditures, what are our revenues, how exactly are Kenyans going to be benefiting from this. And of course, we have Newton Kamasi, who is going to be our governance expert. I'm going to be harassing you a little bit on how the government has been using this money, how Kenyans will be benefiting from this budget. Now, gentlemen, just to recap what happened last year, the budget was 3.3 trillion. Now, as at last year, that was the highest budget we've ever had, and the revenue from it was 2.57 trillion that came from tax, around 347 billion in grants, and 720 billion in deficit. Now, I'll start with you, Kamasi. Maybe if you could just tell us, 3.3 trillion. Last year, it was hiked. This year, it's 3.9 trillion. It's come down from around 4.2 trillion. How are we doing well when it comes to that particular number? Are we punching above our weight? What do you think about this?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. And in regards to how we're doing as a country, remember, our country is in a growth scale.
Right.
Like we are experiencing some economic growth. And as we have that economic growth, remember that as this grows, also the budgets and the expenditures will increase.
All right.
But we have the leadership that is focused on having a physical policy that is really effective, and it's something that is long-term and not short-term.
Right.
Because as you know, as a country, we have been depending on external borrowings a lot.
Right.
And you've seen the Kenya Kwanza government has been very particular. They're like, no, we don't need to depend on the external borrowings, and we just need funding from within, internal borrowing or internal revenue generation.
Right.
And that is why the president, in his all tax policies, you can see that he's very key to ensure that the physical health of the country is great by reducing the budget deficits that we have, reducing the debts that we borrow to enable to finance these particular processes.
Right.
And therefore, I believe we are on the right trajectory, depending on the GDP that we're experiencing as a country.
Right. Numbers don't lie, is what I always say, because you can play with a lot of things, but you cannot play with numbers.
Yes.
Now, the deficit is around 4.4% of the gross domestic product. That's around 720 billion shillings. And this would be financed, because this is a portion that cannot be financed by our revenues, the collected revenue. Now, do you believe, Wycliffe, I'll come to you now, do you believe that this number is sustainable?
What we've seen before is that, first, let me thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So I want to agree with what Newton has said, that there's a growth trajectory.
Right.
And that also we've been reducing the deficit year in. However, when you look at the absolute numbers, what we're looking at, the absolute numbers have been going up.
Right.
So as much as the deficit is now 4.4%, when you look at the absolute number, that is actually still high.
Right.
And the question that I think everyone has been asking, is it possible to now have a balanced budget so that we live within our means? Because when you look at the borrowing, what is going to happen is that the 700 billion is going to be borrowed. And we're talking about this when we know that our borrowing has hit the 10 trillion mark. So if you think about it and think about sustainability, this number needs to come down.
Right.
And I think it is about time we started thinking about balancing our budget. And in this case, we've got to look at the expenditure.
Right.
We're not talking of 3.9 trillion. Last year we had 3.3. So what is this making our numbers go up?
Right.
Are we able to say, let's create a freeze on certain areas of expenditure so that we avoid borrowing? Because the more we borrow, the more that we'll forever have this cycle. I remember when when this government came in place and our borrowing was about 8 trillion, they actually promised that we were never going to borrow.
Right.
But we understand that they have got to borrow because we have expenditure to meet.
Right.
And I strongly believe it is time for us to think, open up the budgets, because what we've not seen is someone going to the budgets and opening them up and seeing what is in this budget that keeps growing.
Right.
And is there misuse of funds packaged in form of a budget?
Right.
So that these figures go out of the budget and we have a lower expenditure, because that is what we really need at this point as a country.
Right. Now, thank you so much for that. Newton, I'll come back to you now. Of course, these numbers will keep on rising. The deficit now, according to, the Budgets and Appropriations Committee Chair, Ndindi Nyoro, he said that they've cut the deficit by about 100 billion Kenyan shillings, in a bid to ensure that we live within our means. But is 100 billion really enough?
The 100 billion is not enough, as you say. But again, you look at it this way. How are we as a country going to be able to reduce this deficit?
Right.
And some of the innovative ideas that have come through this government is the fact that the government is targeting to broaden the tax base, which is very critical to be able to reduce this deficit. And as much as Kenyans might feel a lot of pain, I believe that the government of the day has a better plan for them, considering that when we increase the tax base, that means that we are bringing in more people who are not paying taxes to be able to come on board and pay these taxes effectively and efficiently. And as well, I can tell you this, and you can confirm this with the government of the day, that this country, we don't have less resources. We have enough resources. The only challenge that we have is the misuse, as my colleague has said. The fact that we have people in government spaces who budget corruption. That is something that is very critical, that if addressed perfectly, then as a country, we are going to reduce that cap of deficit. We'll be seeing resources going into the intended purposes and going to the essential things that are supposed to be done. Because if that doesn't happen, then you realize that as a country, we'll continue increasing the deficit instead of reducing it. Yes.
Now, when it comes to expenditures, I, of course, do see the logic in ensuring that whatever we're spending on is what we're supposed to be spending it on. The budget is very specific on how much is going to which state department, what sector, so on and so forth. Now, Wycliffe, I'll just come to you. When it comes to auditing, because accountants are the ones who are supposed to ensure that that money goes to where it's supposed to go, the PSABS had said that they're moving from a cash accounting system to an accrual accounting system. It's been one financial year. As an accountant, do you believe that, one, it's been implemented, and two, is it working?
The accrual accounting is not yet implemented. I think this past week, the PSABS board, as you rightly said, had engagements with the county governments, and the roadmap has been created. I think the period now will be 3 years from today for the accrual accounting to be implemented. But the whole idea about accrual accounting is for us to be able to do proper accounting, so to speak. It's actually at times we fail to understand how come we've come this far with cash-based accounting. Because when you have cash-based accounting, then you have problems like the pending bills. You have situations where money is spent, but because it has not been paid off, that expenditure is not captured anywhere. And that creates a number of problems. So I believe the accrual accounting is a step towards the right direction, and we can't wait as accountants for us to experience it and feel it for the country, because it has worked perfectly well in the private sector and also for other corporations, the state corporations. And it should be able to work for government as well.
I'm really curious, Wycliffe, maybe if you could just, let me into the secrets of your trade. When it comes to the PSABS, I've engaged with them a little bit, and one of, the qualms that they had is that a lot of government agencies are not very forthcoming with some of the papers that they're supposed to be having, and that might be one of the barriers to ensuring that the accrual, system is taken, in. Do you think that maybe there is some sort of progress in that regard?
I think those are standard challenges with change. Whenever there's new change, whenever there's change in anything, you will expect that there's a resistance because human beings are at times accustomed to, we have always done it this way.
Right.
That's what I think it is. But not to say that there's no goodwill. I think the goodwill is there, but maybe people who are involved do not have a good understanding of which direction this accrual accounting is taking them. And for that reason, they are a bit hesitant. But I'm sure that change will be managed well, and we should be able to get to the right direction.
All right, we are all hopeful. And speaking about change, some of the things that, we are seeing happening right now, that the budget is coming closer and closer, is some of the ways that the government is ensuring that they do widen that tax bracket, as Newton had put it, and of course through the finance bill. Now, we touched ground with some of the Kenyans to know what exactly they think about this finance bill. Let's take a look. All right, as we ruffle, around to try and find those clips, Newton, I must throw it to you now. There has been a lot of resistance when it comes to the finance bill. There are some clauses that people don't necessarily agree with, and do we have it? Now we can see what Kenyans have to say about that.
Tulikuwa tunasikia mkifanya kampeni. Kila siku mnaongeza. Lakini saa hii nyinyi tena tumewapea serikali, mmeanza tena hata nyinyi kutuongezea.
Saa hii tunaumia, sabuni ni 200. Hii kidogo hii. Mkipitisha hii finance bill yenu, tutanunua sabuni na 500. Na sisi wengine atukule. Mnafikiria watu wote wa Kenya hii wanakula? Nyinyi mnatembea na mandege, mnakula vizuri, mnatembea na magari makubwa. Hapa chini tunaumia, na tunaumia shauri yenu. Tafadhali wabunge, mtusikie kabisa kilio chetu. Tunawaomba kwa sababu saa hii hatuna nguvu ya kujitetea. Lakini
all right, that's what Kenyans have to say about the finance bill that might come into effect in, the 1st of July. Newton, I was just about to get your views on that. You have said that it's necessary to widen the tax bracket in order to ensure that we have more revenue to be funding our budget, which is, quite large. Do you believe that some of the clauses need to be changed, first of all? And what's your opinion on what Kenyans had to say?
First of all, yes, I said as a country, we are in a state where we need to increase our tax bracket.
Right.
And for us to achieve this, there are pain points that are going to come by to ensure that this happens. And something I've just noticed from whatever clips you've played, Kenyans are really misinformed with this finance bill.
Right.
You realize that the aspect that touches them is very minimal. If you look at this finance bill, it is moving away from the direct taxes, because if you look at the 2023 finance bill, was focusing mostly on the people who are being paid through a payslip, the formal jobs. But this year, if you look at and analyze the finance bill correctly, it is focusing on the indirect taxes, which are consumer taxes. You got me? So if you look at that, you realize that as a country or as a government, people are very misinformed.
Right.
Because if you look at some of the taxes, like the one for bread, it is not to pain Kenyans. No, it is just a way of, look, you consume bread.
Right.
So as a government, they feel like that particular expansion or to tap into that particular space, they'll be able to raise some good revenue from it and to be able to sustain the government in the long-term thing. And another thing that Kenyans are not understanding.
Right. Newton, just to, interject a little bit. The finance bill, as you've said, of course, there might not be enough information out there for Kenyans to, ensure, to know what exactly is going to be taxed. Now, as you rightly put it, the Finance Act that we have right now did kind of go for the employed lot. And one would say that this finance bill is going for the manufacturing sector, and Kenyans are the ones who are consuming some of these goods, the ordinary Kenyans. Sabuni, mafuta, basins, plastic. The eco levy is going to be touching on a lot of plastic products. Do you still, maintain your stance?
Yes, I still maintain my stance, because what I've said is this. You see, as most Kenyans are saying, the finance bill is focusing on manufacturing.
Right.
Now, if you do a critical analysis on it, it is consumer-based. What you consume.
Who are the consumers?
The consumers, yes, are Kenyans.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we are the same Kenyans who are going to suffer if the leadership of the day does not look into the physical imbalances that we have
Newton,
in this
do you
country.
believe that we can tax ourselves into success?
No, we cannot tax ourselves into success. But what we can do, we can pay taxes
Right.
to ensure that we have a sustainable future. Because that is something that Kenyans don't want. Kenyans want immediate gratification,
Right.
which is something that is not achievable. And as a right, straight thinking Kenyan, I believe this government of the day has that particular long-term plan on this particular goal, so that at the end of the day, let me ask, if as a country we get ourselves into an economic downturn and get ourselves into a sustainable economic path,
Right.
which one is more favorable?
Right.
The economic sustainable path than the economic downturn. So what the government is doing right now, and if you recall, the president came in, the government of Kenya Kwanza,
Right.
came in when our economy was really doing bad. As Rigiji says it was dilapidated. Okay? And now, this is a man who, yes, outside here he puts a very brave face, but inside he's burning to ensure that the country, Kenya,
Right,
does
Minister.
not slide into that.
Of course,
particular-
tulipe ushuru,
Yes.
tujitegemee, it's very important. However, you have rightly put it that the Finance Act had, of course, the employees in mind, and a lot of the taxes did go, towards, or the revenue collection was directed towards them. That means that their disposable income was already compromised. Now, if consumer goods are in the next finance bill, that means that they might not have as much money to give. How do you give when you do not have?
Not giving. There are scenarios where you
Right.
walk into a shop and you're going to buy something.
Right.
You realize that the supermarket you're going to, or even the shop in your small residential area,
Right.
has hiked the prices. And yet the government has not imposed taxes on those particular products.
Right.
So when the government comes in to say, look, as consumers, you are comfortable paying high prices on these particular products. Why don't we as government take that opportunity
But you
to collect
also
some
do
of these
realize
taxes?
that a product's prices are based on a lot of things, not just taxation. There's, manufacturing is always changing. The shilling, keeps hiking and going down. The raw materials are being imported, so that might,
So when you look at it from that perspective, you're looking at it with a buyer's perspective.
Okay.
Because you're looking at it like this angle, this thing should go this way. But you expect this other side to remain constant. How?
Right. Okay.
So whatever changes on this side will transform into a change on the other side. And that is why in this finance bill, we need to look at the key objectives of it.
Right.
Not really the contents, but what do we want to achieve with this finance bill?
All right.
And the moment Kenyans understand that particular aspect of it, then we are going to be in tandem with whatever the finance bill wants to achieve.
All right. Wycliffe, now I have to throw it to you. Of course, it's been very heated between me and Newton here. What do you believe, or what do you think about this whole, taxation regime? Do you believe that it is, in the long term, going to ensure that we have more revenue? Can you ensure that, you tax yourself into success, so to speak?
Thank you. I strongly want to disagree with my friend Newton.
Right.
Because if you look at it very critically, I agree with him on the fact that this bill is focused more on the indirect taxes, away from the direct taxes.
Right.
Unlike last year's Finance Act, which was more on direct taxes.
Right.
But you see, why is that the case? I strongly believe it's because there was no, or rather the chances of going more on direct taxes were lower this year because most of the items had been exploited last year.
Right.
Then they came in this year and said, you know what, let's now go in for this other side, and that's how indirect taxes have come in, and that's why you can see that the focus is more on the consumption taxes. Now, and I like the question you asked, Newton, that now that employee who got a hit last year, the disposable income was lower. This year, you're now saying go pay taxes under the consumption tax. So indirectly, we're saying we attacked you last year, we are now coming for you here. The argument that, of course, we need to raise money, and I agree, we've got to raise revenue as a country for us to be self-sustaining. But again, have we really spent time to build our economy? Because if you go back and look what has happened previously, is that there was deliberate moves to build the economy so that once you build the economy well, people will be in a position, will have the ability to actually pay taxes. If you are attacking manufacturers, these are the same people who employ Kenyans. These are the same people who give them an income to go spend. So what happens when manufacturers move out of the country, you lose employment. When people lose employment, you do not have people to actually spend and pay you consumption taxes. So there's that ripple effect. We need to be very careful. And you've seen in this bill where it has been heavy on VAT and also excise tax. If you look at excise tax, for example, you are telling a manufacturer that they are deleting the section 14 of the Excise Act, which gives people a leeway, manufacturers a leeway to claim back the excise tax they pay on raw materials. Now that is being deleted. So what that means, as a manufacturer, I will pay excise tax on my raw materials, then I'll go ahead and charge the consumer, but I have no way of recovering the input, the input excise tax. So that means, as a trader, I'm now bearing the brunt. So we're becoming uncompetitive. How are we then building the economy? How are we ensuring that we have a secured future for our taxes, so to speak? I could have expected that we encourage manufacturing, we encourage more investments in the economy. That way, we're going to build an economy that has got money. However, speaking on the disposable income, there's a bit that was done, which was good, which ensured that we actually have more disposable income from the employees, although a little bit, because last year we made a lot of noise about the housing levy, and then a little bit we had SHIF coming in. So those two are now tax allowable. So in this bill, which is a good move. As much as we were unhappy about the shift, because we do not understand the shift to 2.75%, we do not understand the shift from NHIF, but now that it is there, now that it is low, and also the housing levy, now that it is there, I think it is a good move to at least make them tax allowable, that it is deductible before you calculate the pay as you earn.
And of course, you know, the vision where I believe the Kenya Kwanza government was looking towards is it will get a bit harder before it gets better. Now, Newton, as a governance expert, how so? How will it, you know, when is the turnaround?
The turnaround is not going to be short term. It is going to be long term. And in all our regimes from independence, you realize that the presidents were fearful of taking the hard decisions. And for you to grow an economy like now, an upcoming economy like Kenya, you really need to be tough and focused on the long-term goal than the short-term. Yes, a president has 5 years to rule, but now these 5 years are not enough to turn around an economy. But we need someone who is focused, who is determined to ensure that as a country we become better. And as I've said, as much as the manufacturing sector is saying that this finance bill is hurting them, will they like to work in an economy that is not stable? That is the question I would like to pose to them. Because a stable economy enables that these manufacturing companies are able to thrive in that particular environment.
Right.
But if you find an unstable economy, let's say like we agree to whatever they're saying, or the government says, okay, fine, we'll remove whatever you want and we'll give you what you want. What happens to the economy? What happens to the larger picture? What happens to the future? So we need government to be tough and to ensure that we are focusing on the long-term goals of our nation, not the short-term benefits, because the short-term will be sweet, but in the long term, it will be painful. But as a country, and you have seen the government has been very categorical that look, it will be painful now, but in the long term, you will have a stable economy. Look at the US. It is a very stable economy. People do business there, but if you compare vis-a-vis the taxes they pay and the taxes here in Kenya, you realize that we are very low. And that is why the president said we need to focus to achieve that particular goal. Yes, at a first level, because we are just shy to 2030 vision. But are we there as a country? This decision that the president is taking right now through the finance bill or through these policies that he's passing are policies that were supposed to be taken earlier. But now because you have a short term and we need to achieve them, then the hard decisions have to be made.
Newton, when it comes to growing an economy, usually the taxpayer is enabled first before they are taxed. Do you think maybe that we have this in reverse where we're trying to tax the person before we give them the ability to pay?
I think since time independence, we have been enabling the taxpayer.
So it's about time people start paying.
It is about time people start paying taxes, to be honest. Because if we don't pay taxes, how do you expect the government to run? And you see, the beautiful thing about this is you realize that with these tough tax measures, the president has reduced the expenditure of government, the parastatals by 30%. And this is informed by the budget estimates for 2023. So this is someone who is determined to ensure that as much as I'm collecting this, I want to show Kenyans this is what we are spending on. And he has come out strongly. Even the office of the president itself has reduced its expenditure. The office of the deputy president, the office of the prime cabinet secretary. So this is someone who knows and understands that Kenyans have no problem paying taxes. The problem Kenyans have is the utilization of these taxes. The day Kenya will come to a stage where we utilize our taxes perfectly and smoothly, we don't see people being dragged to court, they have stolen billions of money. Trust you me, as a Kenyan, you will be comfortable to pay those taxes. And I believe the Kenya Kwanza government is focused on ensuring that as a country, we are almost at zero in regards to corruption. Because if we don't have corrupt public servants, trust you me, the taxes will be collected, Kenyans will not feel pain because they will see infrastructure, they will see affordable housing coming up, they will see affordable healthcare, and education sector will be financed perfectly. And trust me, with that, Kenyans will be very willing to pay taxes. Yes.
Now, Wycliffe, I see that you're eager to be answering some of the things that Newton has said.
I actually wish Newton will tell us which measures are these that the Kenya Kwanza government has put in place to reduce corruption.
All right, so Newton will be answering that right after this very short break.
Kila kiongozi ana hadithi yake ya kipekee.
Wazazi wangu walikuwa bit strict kwa sababu mamangu mwenyewe mimi kutoka kuzaliwa sijailala nje.
The white small one, huyo ana sniff gunpowder na risasi na bomb. Alafu huyo mwingine ni ridgeback ana sniff simba.
Even the employees knows that, so when in the boardroom is the chairman, the CEO. And the rest
At what point are you a wife?
The minute you get to that inside that door, you become now the wife.
Na kila maamuzi wanayoyafanya hufichua mengi kuhusu utu wao na uongozi wao.
We see God blessing us, and we now realize the power of giving also has to be rewarded back.
Kupitia kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi, tunakuletea mahojiano ya kusisimua na uchambuzi wa kina kuhusu viongozi wetu.
Pick your core business as the bigger stones. Put them in your diary first. Give priority the bigger things.
Usikose kila Alhamis saa 1:30 jioni.
In a world where challenges are as common as opportunities, there are those who dare to defy the odds. They are the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship isn't just about starting a business, it's about embracing uncertainty, pushing boundaries and turning dreams into reality.
Hata ambao ni pesa ya kusave, wallahi. Ambao mwaka ni pesa nyingi sana.
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
The way business is and for where
so all the dreamers, innovators, being just Entrepreneur Mondays.
Here on we journey stones to greatness.
I'm Nancy Njoroge, a mother of 3. I have 2 girls and a boy who is Clinton and who is autistic.
When my heart got healed, I decided to come out to be creating CP awareness, to let other people know that there is such a condition and people that have
Welcome back to the marketplace. Before we went on a break, we had a very heated conversation here in our studios. And of course, Wycliffe had posed a question to Newton. Newton, I'll give you the chance now to answer.
Yeah. Now, what is the government doing
to
curb corruption? I can tell you for a fact that since Kenya Kwanza came to government, I have not heard of any corrupt public servant who has been arrested to be taken to court. You realize that those people who are being arrested right now by the EACC are majorly people who were in the previous regimes and previous governments. So if you can tell, we have, first of all, we have a leader who is hands-on. He does not delegate. And if he has a very good intelligence system, and if he gets information that there is something going to happen somewhere, he calls that CS or whoever is in charge there and tells them, look, you're not going to destroy my government. You're not going to impact the people of Kenya negatively. So this thing, you have to do it the right way. And that is why you see the president has made everyone in his government accountable, including the cabinet secretary, the permanent secretaries. If they do something, then you will be held accountable. Because the major thing here is the people of Kenya to get value for the taxes they pay, and they are going to do it willingly.
Now, Newton, you've pointed out something, that I find very essential, that some of the people who are being, the EACC is going for people who are in the previous regime. Wouldn't you say that that might be politically motivated?
That is not politically motivated. If someone is corrupt, if someone is stealing public resources, what is political instigation on that? It is just a fact that this person, imagine you are a CS of Treasury and you're found with a lot of money in your house. What are you doing with that money? As a cabinet secretary for Treasury, you're supposed to be one of the advocates that, look, if you have money, channel it in the banking system so that at least if those who want loans, they can get it. Now, if you steal and you go stash in your house, how does that become? Allegedly, yes. Allegedly. How does that impact the whole system? So, as we are right now as a country, we are in a place where we need to focus and ensure that the resources that Kenyans pay through taxes are utilized perfectly.
Right. Wycliffe, now I'll come to you as a Kenyan, right? Of course, all of us, we do see some of the charges that are being posed to different people by the EACC. Do you believe that this is the right direction that the country should be taking?
Yes, we should be able to prosecute those who we believe were not as honest as they ought to have been. So I'll be the last person to say we shouldn't arrest, we shouldn't arraign people we suspect. Because again, when EACC comes for you, it doesn't mean that you are condemned. You will have a chance, of course, to prove that you're actually innocent. So that we've got to do.
Right.
But the only thing, and I agree with you, what you asked Newton, is that it doesn't mean if people have not been arrested, it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
It could be we are covering for ourselves, but I don't want to say that.
Right.
Only that it's not obvious that it's because it's not happening, but we really hope it is actually not happening. Despite the fact that we remember the fertilizer scandal that happened the other day.
Right.
So we just hope that indeed we are getting value elsewhere.
Right.
I also don't think it's good to have someone, a leader who is hands-on, but I also think at times being hands-on limits the creativity of the people who you give tasks.
Right.
So I'm not sure to what level that's a very good thing. It is a good thing that is aware what is happening, but again, I think it does limit the creativity of the people who he has entrusted with the work. And we've already seen some people being very naive in jobs that they should be able to deliver.
Right.
And you get the feeling that probably it's because the headway is not there as much.
Right. Now, let's go back to living within our means, which is a very huge thing, especially with the current, government regime. And when we look at our, projections for this particular budget, the total expenditure, which is the budget, is around 3.9 trillion Kenyan shillings, the highest yet. Newton, I'll come to you now. Do you believe that this, we can live within our means with such a, high budget?
As I said, as an economy grows, then the budget must grow.
Right.
Even as a household, if you have 3 kids and you add another one, your budget will go up.
Right.
So as a country, we are a growing economy, a very fast growing economy for that fact. And therefore, as this happens, then everything grows. But the increment depends on the management.
Right.
Because if you don't have good management of the resources you have, then you end up struggling to be even at par with whatever you're doing.
Right.
So I believe we are able to live within our means. And the fact that the government of the day is willing to move with that journey of we will lead by example of living within our means. That is a very commendable aspect of it. And I believe that at the end of the day, it will be painful, but at the end of the day, we'll be able to live within our means.
All right. Right. Now, when it comes to debt management, this government did also come up with, an idea that when we're taking up debt or when we're managing our debts, we're not going to do it by, looking at a debt ceiling, which used to be 10 trillion, but I do believe that we have, surpassed that, but as a percentage of the gross domestic product to ensure that, we don't take more than, we can pay back. Wycliffe, when it comes to that, the recurrent expenditure is still 2.7 trillion of the 3.9 trillion budget, but we're trying to move towards a regime where it is a percentage of the gross domestic product. The aim is around 50%. Do you believe that we're going towards the right direction?
Obviously, for us to grow, we've got to seriously think about the development expenditure, where you have a situation that 3 out of the 3.9, 2.7 is recurrent. So that leaves you with 1.2 for development. Then what that means is that in terms of now the future prospects, you are sort of cutting your future prospects. But of course, when you have a huge debt to pay, because part of the 2.7, it includes the debt repayment, then you realize that you really do not have much options. You've got to factor in, you've got to have a high recurrent expenditure rather than development expenditure. So in terms of are we moving to the right direction? Yes, we are, because when you look at all the percentages against the GDP, we're not doing badly.
Right.
But what we are saying is that we can do better.
Right.
We can rationalize our expenditure better and probably have now the ratios turned the other way around, where we're having a better percentages for our development expenditure.
All right. Now, of course, the amount that we're going to be borrowing, projections that we're going to be borrowing is around 700 billion Kenyan shillings, give or take. Now, we are looking towards ensuring that we reduce the amount that we usually borrow so that we can have less debt as a country. 700 billion plus the already 10 plus trillion is going to be a very high number. The gross domestic product remains at around 15 trillion. Do you think that maybe, we are punching above our weight?
I actually will go back to what I said earlier, that it is time we looked at clearing the deficit. There are things that we're able to get out of our budget. There's wastage that is budgeted in our government that can get out and give us the 700. We just need to open up our budgets and see where is this wastage, because we all know and agree that there is wastage that is budgeted at times.
Right.
And we get it out so that we do not need to borrow. And you see, we've worked very hard raising revenues, which is a good thing.
Right.
And that has been, when we look at the deficit has been reducing, one of the aspects of reducing that has been increasing revenue.
Right.
But it's now time to say whatever has remained, we can now get it from the expenditure by reducing the expenditure. Back to the example Newton gave, that if you have 3 children, you get a 4th one, you will have to increase your budget. At times, not necessarily.
Right.
You are buying them 3 pairs of shoes, you can buy 2, you still have the same thing. So you've grown, yes, but you've also sort of taken care of, reduced your expenditure, and not in a bad way. You will take the hit. In fact, the hit that Newton is talking about,
right.
You take the hit by reducing your own expenditure. That is how you take the hit for the future, for the better, so that you avoid now future, because the more debt you take, the more generations will be indebted.
Right. Right. Newton, of course, when it comes to that, around 300 billion Kenyan shillings went into in the last supplementary budget. It was an amount that was accrued on top of the debt that we already had, but because it was in dollars and the dollar hiked against the shilling, we had to repay it. When it comes to looking at the future, do you think that maybe we need to take more steps to ensure that, as he said, we're not channeling money into wastage?
Yeah, and I just want to echo something that he said. Our budgeting process needs to be transparent. We need to see, we have 3 trillion budget. How are we spending this money?
Right.
To the last coin. The day we'll have that transparency, then as a country, we'll be moving in the right direction.
Right.
And then another thing is compliance. You realize that in this country, there are a lot of tax leakages.
Right.
You need to pay 1 billion, you'll approach the tax officer with 100 million, and he will waive, you will pay 500 million.
Right.
So the day we will do the compliance aspect of it, and I'm glad the Kenya Revenue Authority has really come up with dynamic systems, like the eTeams platform, whereby as a trader, you cannot be paid or you cannot issue an invoice that is not eTeams compliant.
Right.
That is a way of improving compliance status in the country. And trust you me, if we can even achieve 80% compliance in regards to invoicing process, then as a government, Kenya Revenue Authority is going to collect as much revenue as possible, and even those tax-paying Kenyans will feel accommodated, because it is very painful for a matter of fact that as Newton, I'm paying my taxes.
Right.
But Wycliffe here is not paying his taxes.
Not that Wycliffe doesn't pay taxes. I'm sure.
I'm just giving an example. I'm just giving an example. Yes, just an example. You get me? Or let's say Wycliffe is paying taxes, and Newton here is not paying taxes, because I know someone at KRA. It will make him not want to pay taxes. He will want to implement my ways of doing business. But the moment Wycliffe comes and realizes Newton issues ETIM's invoice. The moment I issue an invoice, KRA has a copy of that particular invoice. That is compliance 100%.
Right.
So what he will do, he will also issue that. And the moment he does that, if he was evading taxes, trust you me, he will be able to pay those taxes. And as a government or as a Kenya Revenue Authority, they will be able to collect the right revenues that we need. And we realize that actually we are living way below our means.
Right.
And there's a moment, I believe, by the time President William Ruto is finishing his term, I believe as a country, we will not even be needing to do a deficit budget.
Right.
We'll be just be doing a budget
Right.
that is equivalent to what we need and what we want to achieve.
Right, and that is a dream, but let's talk about reality.
It is not a
Wycliffe.
dream.
When it comes to, we do know that it's going to be ending, in a couple of years. Do you believe that this is a goal that we can achieve, considering the type of fiscal decisions that we usually take? Just noting that already our debt is above, 10 trillion shillings.
I love the example that Newton gave about ETIMS. It's true, and as a tax practitioner myself, I know that TIMS is a game changer.
Right.
And the expectation should be that in the next few years we'll have more people even getting into the bracket. And Hibaq, the issue with compliance is such that we bring a level playing ground in the marketplace.
Right.
When you look at traders, if, again, the same example, that if one trader is paying taxes, another one is not, now the one who is not paying taxes can place their goods in the market cheaply.
Right.
And now it becomes impossible to compete. So that is the other aspect, that if we bring everyone into the bracket, then you make it easier to compete out there. So on ETIMS, I'm with the government 100%, that it is important for us to implement ETIMS. Only that now we've got to make sure that actually everyone is compliant. Although I do not agree with the proposal in this finance bill, which says
the 2 million fine.
Exactly.
Right.
That if you're not compliant, you're going to be fined 2 million. What is going to happen to some small entities?
Micro, small, and medium enterprises, surely.
No, let me ask you something.
Right.
Sorry to interject.
I know Newton. I know Newton is saying if you plan to comply, then why are you worried about the 2 million?
Correct.
Right, but we're talking about MSMEs here. A majority of them, in the informal sector.
You see, KRA has made it so accessible information on how to comply. So why should you not comply? It is something simple. You can access it through your eCitizen. You don't need a complicated software somewhere or a complicated accountant somewhere to do these things for you. It is simple. You can do it on your phone.
A lot of Kenyans
So compliance, you see, you see also, every human being, they are created with a mindset of not following the law. They like breaking the law. That is the nature of human being.
All right.
So because of that, to ensure compliance, non-compliance needs to be punitive.
Okay.
For you to be able to bring these people into the tax bracket. Because if you don't, there'll be a lot of leakages, and that is what, like the president has affirmed to. I will ensure total compliance on paying of taxes, including himself. We had a scenario, he visited the Times Tower.
Right.
And he was like, I want to be compliant.
Right.
And he was furnished with everything he needed.
But that is, the president. It's so easy for him to be compliant if we're looking at all the aspects, considering that, his office does have enough staff to be doing that for him. But, we're talking about the local Kenyan here.
That is what I'm saying. If you're a local Kenyan and you're doing business, the SMEs, please, the best way, if you can't pay 2 million, just comply.
Right.
Simple.
What are your views on this, Wycliffe?
Again, as I said, ETIMS, very good idea. It's time for Kenyans to comply. But a 2 million penalty is a little bit on the higher side.
Right.
Not that we intend not to comply, but we know realities. What will happen is that a KRA officer walks into a restaurant, orders a soda. They do not give a receipt because there's a delay somewhere.
Right.
This guy says, you know what?
2 million. Right there, pay it.
Yeah, and because you don't have 2 million, tuonane hapo kando. Those are realities. So what is going to happen that we're going to have other people benefiting out of this.
Right.
At the same time hurting businesses. You've got to put penalties that are reasonable and probably as a percentage of the non-compliance.
Right.
You cannot put a figure like 2 million. There are businesses who've never seen 2 million in this country.
Right.
So for whatever reason they didn't comply, you're telling them 2 million. So what are you telling them? Close down and go home. Because we have businesses that do not make that kind of money.
Right.
When they do not comply, what happens?
Right.
And those are livelihoods. So we've got to also be very sensitive on that.
Of course. A government for the people, by the people. Newton, you have something to say?
No, what I'm saying is compliance is not an option.
All right.
It is a mandatory. Comply, you will not pay the 2 million.
Right.
If there are challenges.
Don't you believe that, Newton, you're being, I know you're a governance expert and things are very either right or wrong, black or white. Don't you feel like you're being a bit insensitive to,
No, we are not being insensitive.
Right.
It is a fact. KRA has offered amnesty on people. True or false? You're a tax practitioner, right?
It's ending this month.
Exactly. So KRA is an understanding authority.
Say a person who is starting a business.
On the contrary, Newton.
Yes.
Right.
The amnesty was sort of ushering in a regime where you're never going to have penalties and interest waived.
Right.
So they said, you know what?
For
Cut
now.
off. 31st December 2022. Any interest penalties, pay everything, we'll give you a waiver for that. But any taxes after that, there's never going to be a waiver ever, because the Finance Act of 2023 deleted the provision where the commissioner had a chance of waiving the interest and penalties.
Right.
So we are saying it's a good thing. They gave an amnesty and a waiver we have enjoyed. As a tax practitioner, my clients have enjoyed that far. But going forward, it is never going to happen.
CPA, we are living in the current.
Yes.
Right?
All right.
The future, we don't know about it. But something that is Kenyans, the SME people, the people who are doing small scale businesses.
Right.
Something I can tell them is do your business. Even the Bible says, give
To Caesar.
Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The moment you do that, it is going to be a smooth ride for you.
Right.
If you don't do that, you'll find your issues with Caesar.
Practical, Newton. Is it practical? You know, we're looking at a government that came into power knowing that, you know, hustlers usually have A, B, C, D as problems. Do you maybe believe that this is turning against the people?
No, it is not. It is not turning against people. What I can say about that is this. As a hustler, what will make you not pay taxes?
And yet it is.
And if you're not able to, if you're not, no, let us not generalize.
Right.
Because what you're doing here, we are generalizing this conversation of compliance and all that.
Right.
Let each SME or any director of a business that feels like this is not doable or they failed to pay because of this, let them walk to their customer care representative at Kenya Revenue Authority and tell them, look, I do this business. I paid for these goods. They are yet to come in the country. I might be late to pay these taxes, but please consider me for this. It is a matter of talking and
but
having a conversation.
But that's an ideal situation.
Yes.
That is in an ideal world. Is that actually happening on ground?
It is something that is doable.
I think, Wycliffe, knowing that, you know, you're a tax practitioner, is this happening on ground?
Yes, people are actually negotiating and agreeing on payment plans. That's happening. But as I said, now the provision of getting a waiver on the interest has gone.
Right.
Effective 1st January 2023. So what that means, even if you are to sign a payment plan and agree, you're still going to pay 1% interest per month.
Right.
On the liability that you had.
All right.
So yes, you can agree, but there's still a pain that you're going to feel in.
Right.
And to me, that is where the whole thing turns a little bit ugly.
Right.
Because you can imagine you're a trader. You've supplied to government. Government has not paid you, but you've done your returns and the liability is showing.
All right.
Government is never going to pay you interest for delaying paying you. But government, through KRA, will charge you interest for the liability that you had with them.
Right.
To me, that's the pain.
Right. Now, gentlemen, I believe we don't have enough time. And because we don't have enough time, and Newton, I believe you have something to say. I have 2 minutes. So please be kind and try to conclude.
So what me I can say is this, that as a nation, as a people, let us look at things with the objective of those things.
Right.
Like the finance bill. I am very certain the crafters of this finance bill did not craft it for Kenyans to feel pain, but they crafted for a particular objective. And my objectives, the way I look at it, are basically 3. First of all is to increase the tax base.
Right.
Second is to increase the revenue, and also to have a consistent and sustainable physical environment as a government, as a nation, as an economy that is growing and has a future to be stable. Those are the objectives. The objectives are not to harm or hurt the people of Kenya.
All right. Now, Wycliffe, I'll just give you a minute as well to conclude.
I agree the objective is not to hurt, but at times if you do not take care of your actions, you end up hurting. I'll give you an example. You introduce VAT on banking services and say that if you go, bank charges will charge you 16% over and above excise, which you've again increased it from 15% to 20%. What have you done? You will end up hurting that same economy. You will end up having a situation where even your own customers are now running away from banks. And at the same time, the banks need that money to lend to the rest of us to run the economy.
Right.
So you may end up now hurting the economy because we do not have the money circulation, because people may be forced to go back to mattress banking. So some of these proposals have got to be looked at the effects across the economy.
Right.
And VAT on banking services, for example, that to me is not fair.
All right.
It will hurt the economy.
And with that, we end this conversation here on The Marketplace. Gentlemen, it's been so much fun. But now it is the World Environment Day. And of course, here at TV47, we did go on ground trying to see how exactly this particular phenomenon is affecting Kenyans. We will be having that. But, you know, from us here, it's a good night.